My name is Chike Agu, and I'm CEO at an organization called Everyone On, and really honored to moderate this panel called Getting to Ubiquitous Access. And really, to make that simpler, it's how do we get internet in this country to everyone, everywhere. What I'm going to do here in this intro part is, first of all, introduce the panelists that we have and really set context for why we're here, as well as the problem that we're looking to solve. And actually, let me do that first. And so why is getting to ubiquitous access a challenge? Because right now we're not there. Right now in this country, if you look at data, whether it be from the US government or from various private sector organizations, you have between 55 million and 65 million people who do not have the internet at home. That is 1 in 5 Americans. I've seen figures closer to 1 in 4 Americans. Those people are disproportionately poor, disproportionately people of color. Many students who are in K-12 trying to get that first high school diploma. In many ways, they don't get those years back. And this is in a day and age when 80% of kids need the internet to do their homework every night. 90% of college applications are online. And just by having the internet at home, according to the Federal Reserve, you are 8% more likely to graduate high school. So the internet is not something for its own sake, but also has deep educational impacts, which again, we're really focused on here today. Let me say a last thing, which is we want to be really specific about what we're talking about when we say internet. We say internet at home because a question that I get in our work a lot, and we are a national organization looking to connect everyone everywhere to the internet, have been blessed to connect over 400,000 people in 48 states across the country since 2012. And a question that I get a lot is, well, aren't smartphones enough? Aren't those everywhere? Mm-hmm. And the answer that I give is just generally a fairly simple one, which is if you're a high school student, it's hard to write your term paper on your iPhone. It's hard to write your resume on your iPhone. It's hard to write a line of code on your smartphone. It's hard to do a financial model on your smartphone for your startup. So again, the question is not our smartphones good or bad, which they're a huge step forward, but they don't get us to the full use and utilization of the internet that each of us has that makes it more productive and actually changes the quality of our lives. So that's why we're here. And the truly last point that I'm going to say is the reason we want to have this conversation at this particular conference is you have an amazing combination of innovation and capital here, looking to dramatically transform how we do education in this country, particularly with the use of technology. That technology will not get past the schoolhouse door if we don't have internet for every student at home, which is where they spend the majority of their waking hours. So until we get to that point, a lot of the innovations that we're talking about here at this great conference are theory. And we want to get past theory to actually making impact in real students' lives. So what I want to do now is throw it to our panel, and I'll do a brief introduction, and then we have targeted questions for each of them, as well as some questions for the rest of the panel. So I'm going to go in order. We have Mr. Daryl Adams, who's the former superintendent of the Coachella Valley, and the founder and CEO of Adams Consulting and Edutainment Services. We have to his right, Ms. Karima Zadan, who is the Director of Digital Inclusion and Internet Essentials at Comcast. We have to her right, Ms. Lara Clark, who's the Deputy Director of the Public Library Association and the American Library Association Office for Information Technology Policy. And lastly, we have Ms. McLean Bryant, who is the Director of Policy for the Office of the Mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. And the reason we brought this particular collection of people together is that if we're going to solve this, we're not going to do it on our own, or we're not going to do it in silos. We're going to do it because we've created an ecosystem of different actors who are working in coordination to solve this problem. So we wanted to bring as many parts of that ecosystem here to get at that. So what I want to do is start with a question to Daryl Adams, who's been on the front line of this, particularly within schools. And what I want you to talk about is, one, can you talk about the impact of the digital divide on the students that you served, and be as visceral as you can, because again, when we talk about this, many people can't believe that in the country that invented the internet, we have that many people who aren't on it. Yes. So talk about what it looked like in your schools every single day, and talk about what you all did to combat that on a regular basis.
Sure, thank you. I think the most important thing I want to stress in my conversation is that there are many school districts out there that are having this difficult struggle. And some of it's based on how large of an area they serve, but also on the socioeconomic level of the community they serve. I happen to get both of those at the school district that I served in. 1,250 square miles, larger than the state of Rhode Island. Every student, 100% on free and reduced lunch. But what I also found was that the education system, typical to a lot in our country, are still traditional based, 20th century systems. And there's not a lot of technology and not a lot of change in the mindset to get students technology and the connectivity that goes with it. So we're fortunate enough to band together a community that said, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to do it ourselves, and we have to be willing to tax ourselves to do it. Because our students need to be competitive when they leave us. They're ready for college, ready for career, ready for citizenship. And we want to ensure that they have the same thing that the students in the affluent districts have. And I called it, basically, we want our students in the column of the haves, not the have-nots. And the community banded together and voted to tax themselves to do it. And we began to march toward the iPads for All initiative, which means every student from preschool to high school had a device. But we promised the parents 24/7 connectivity. So we improved the infrastructure at the schools, but found out there was 30–40% of our students who were not connected at home, because we do have a low socioeconomic status community. And when you look at some of the trailer home parks that some of the students live in some of the rural areas, there was no infrastructure there. So we came up with the idea, well, let's put routers on buses and park them in those neighborhoods. Because students were coming to me and parents were coming to me frustrated because they had to go to the school at 10 o'clock at night because the student had a term paper or they needed to do some research. Or they would go to the Starbucks on Sunday or McDonald's to get connectivity. And we felt like we could do better. And by marshaling all our forces as a community, saying we can figure this out if we do it together, we came up with those solutions, and we have truly eliminated the digital divide in that community. And we're very happy that President Obama recognized that. The community is very proud of that recognition, and we became sort of a lighthouse for districts around the country. There's no excuse. If Coachella Valley Unified School District could do it, you could do it. Whether you're in Appalachia or in the barrios of whatever city, or in the ghettos or whatever city, if you band together as a community, you can eliminate the digital divide.
So, moving to the right, hearing number one the impact of the digital divide in a school district, and being in schools, I've heard very similar stories about kids who go to McDonald's because that's the easiest place to get internet in their community. Moving to Karima, your work at Comcast, and in many ways with, I would argue, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, affordable internet program that was available almost nationwide. Talk about one, why Comcast chose to make that move, and it's continued to be devoted to this. But then secondly, talk about the real impact that you've seen in the educational setting of the Internet Essentials program.
Sure, thanks, Chike. So I think I just want to highlight one thing that Daryl said. I mean, you have an example in Daryl of an excited, dedicated superintendent who really cares about this issue, and you presented this as an ecosystem, and that's what we are here. And the educational ecosystem, the school district, when you have the support of a superintendent, principals, teachers, but particularly administration, that is so clutch to making a difference here. And education has always been core to Comcast's corporate social responsibility mission. So when we launched Internet Essentials in 2011, it was natural to focus on low-income households, and that's the problem we're trying to solve, is the at-home connectivity piece. So we provide affordable internet for $10 a month for low-income households, majority low-income families in the areas that we serve. You can buy a device for $150. And the third piece, the essential piece really, is that we provide a lot of support to nonprofits, community partners, so that they can really help build that digital infrastructure in the communities we serve, provide training and classes, and get people connected and show people why is the internet relevant. And that's really the primary barrier to this industry term called broadband adoption, which is just a fancy way of saying getting people connected at home. Show people why it's relevant. And in education, you have kids in the house, and kids, more than anyone else, you see why it's relevant. They need it. They need it to do their homework at home. I mean, it's in the name. So that's the crux of what we're trying to solve here. We don't do it alone. We do it with all of the partners that are represented on this stage. It's a really important question. To be digitally included, what does it mean? You know, it really means to be socially included, to be economically included, you name it. And that's what we're going for. So that's core to who we are. We provide internet as a company, and it really makes sense to do something that's core to our business. And then we've had this program running for almost 6 years now. Last fall, we announced that we connected 750,000 low-income households. That number is much bigger now, but we'll have to wait a couple of months until I can announce the new number.
And let me highlight a couple of things that Karima has said, and that Comcast and also folks who have in some ways followed the lead of Comcast have also done. If you think about all the barriers that keep people offline, they fit in a couple categories. A big one, and one can argue the biggest one is cost. If you look at the Pew Research, if you look at the CUNY Center at Rutgers University, you see that continually coming up as in survey data as the number one barrier. So you've seen companies like Comcast say, look, we're going to create a price point that actually is affordable for families. That number one. Secondly, what you see is, assuming that I can afford it, am I aware of the option? Meaning, I know the Comcast Internet Essentials exists. I understand that whatever company is, that this is an option that's available to me. And then lastly, whether one calls it relevance, whether one calls it kind of full knowledge, but kind of what are all the things that I can do with the internet that improve the quality of my life? Meaning, hey, I can save money because I pay my bills online and make sure I don't miss a payment. My child, and usually parents are the ones who get it really quickly. No, my kid can do their research paper, which they were given in school. Or, hey, I can apply for a job versus going into the office and actually filling out the paper application, which might get lost. So seeing that, attacking all those barriers is really critical to getting to that digital inclusion. I'll say secondly, something else that Karima mentioned is the internet service is kind of the beginning but not the end of digital inclusion. The ability to get a device that you can do that work on, as well as getting that digital literacy training. I'll tell a story that was told to me. We were lucky to work with Secretary Castro, who was the Secretary of HUD during the previous administration. And he and his brother grew up in San Antonio, and they thought about going to Stanford University for the first time. And so they went to the computer lab, this is maybe in the early 90s, and they went there was a monitor, mouse, CPU, and they had never actually used one of these before. So his brother picked up the mouse and started talking to it because he thought that was the way that you control the machine, because no one had ever taught them how to use that. And we laugh, and it's less an indication of lack of intelligence, but more so a lack of awareness. So how do we attack all three of those things that people are fully digitally included? So I just want to highlight that because it's important. The internet is the beginning, but not the end of what it means to fully be part of that. Going to Lara, libraries in many ways are on the front line of this digital divide. When people don't have the internet at home, they go to their library. Yeah. So what I wanted to hear from you is, number one, talk about what that front line looks like in terms of the people that you serve. And secondly, we've seen libraries in our daily work kind of by hook or by crook try and make it work. So talk about kind of some of the innovative things that you've seen from your organization as a whole, as well as just libraries across the country who are just doing whatever they can to fill this gap.
Sure, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here at the very end of the day. It's a pleasure to be here on a very distinguished panel with partners and doing this work. Usually I like to start with just a little bit of Library 101 in case people have not been to their library recently. We like to talk about place and people and platform. There are more public libraries in this country than there are McDonald's or Starbucks. So we really are the place that people go if we're open. That's always an issue, particularly in smaller communities. The reason why there are more public libraries than there are McDonald's is because we are in very small communities where we're the only anchor institution other than the school. And we're about people. We're not about books. We care about books, we love books, but we're really about people. And we're also one of the most trusted professions after nurses. I don't think we're ever gonna top them. But people trust us. We're a non-commercial space. We really welcome innovators, and we broker digital content in the same way that we broker physical content. But we now are seeing our websites as virtual branches. And so the more people that are connected at home, the more they are able to visit their library 24/7 and have access to interactive online tutoring, homework help around the clock, which is, any parent knows that's when your child really needs it, is, at 11:30 at night. So it's really about people. We're also seeing libraries take a role as media mentors. I think about that in this space where parents will ask librarians, what apps should I be using if I care about my child's education? What would you recommend to me? So we're recommending applications just as we've recommended books. And then last, we're a platform, which I think brings all of this together. We're makerspace platforms. We're working with Cengage on online high schools. We're also, the Public Library Association has developed a digital literacy training platform called Digital Learn. And so that's freely available to anybody to use, but we're also customizing it and personalizing it with libraries. So it's not just a set of 19 modules, but it's 19 modules that then relate to their local job board or their local education resources. So that's kind of broadly where libraries are. The physical still matters, the place still matters, but digital is increasingly important for us. So just about some of the assets that come up in this space, the access in our libraries is still really important. We still have people waiting for our doors to open. We still have waiting lists on our computers. We still have people waiting, using the Wi-Fi after hours in our parking lots. And we still have really high usage of our digital literacy training. People are starting, I was telling Chike when I was visiting a library, they were talking about somebody using the mouse as a clicker, because again, they had never used one before, and that's what they thought of when they thought of a device that clicked. And so there's just a whole range of needs, and it's including coding now. When we think about the new literacies that people are going to need, we're talking about everything from how to use a mouse to how to code. But we're also looking at getting access at home. Wi-Fi lending is a really important part for a lot of libraries. From coast to coast, we're seeing libraries, including in Kansas City, that are using Wi-Fi where they're checking out the internet. But that's a stopgap. It's not a long-term solution like Internet Essentials or other providers. But we're also doing mobile labs where we're going to public housing units, and we're going to senior housing, and we're bringing labs and doing training there. So we're leaving the library. We're taking the library to the people, which is something I really appreciate. And then last, as far as the assets that we're building in this space, is really around partnerships. It's working with all of the folks here, public, private, schools, cities, workforce development, small business administration, that it's really, the access is the beginning, it's the application, and libraries are that no barrier to access place. So if we realize that you don't have the basic literacy, we can plug you into a basic literacy class or an ESL class, as well as make sure you have access to a computer and make sure you know about other broadband programs. So we're doing a lot in this space, and I really am pleased to be part of this larger ecosystem because I think libraries make great partners.
So McLean and I share something in common, which is, we started our careers, or part of our careers, in the municipal government space. I started my career in New York City with Mayor Bloomberg, and you currently are working with the mayor of Kansas City. And so, your job is everything in Kansas City. And so what I want to ask you, McLean, is one, why has Kansas City chosen this as a cause that it wants to take up when, of course, it's something about public safety and economic development and picking up the garbage and all that? And then secondly, you all have created a really interesting local ecosystem in terms of the people that you're bringing around to basically close this digital divide locally. So talk about how you've put together that ecosystem and what you all have been able to produce.
So everybody knows that Kansas City was the first Google Fiber city, and that's kind of our claim to fame. But Google Fiber's arrival in Kansas City really did two things. It put a microscope on where folks were and weren't connected in the city and at what speeds. And then Google also did an analysis of why. And we saw in like most of the country, in our low-income areas and in our more rural areas, and then secondarily our more urban areas, that folks were far less connected than those that had more money or lived in suburban communities. We also saw that for those folks that weren't connected, like some 40% of them weren't connected because they didn't understand the relevancy or see the relevancy of the internet in their lives, which is crazy to anybody in this room, I'm sure, because I could not survive without the internet. And that's been the approach that the mayor's taken. We've got a weak mayor form of government. There's only so much we can do in the office. We're really the policy arm of the municipality. And so, unlike a lot of cities, we can't say, okay, we're going to lay fiber, and we can't just readily throw money at the issue. Even though we'd like to. We don't have, money dedicated to this. We haven't been able to pass a tax dedicated to it. And so our mayor has just really used his power of the bully pulpit to draw attention to this issue as the basic need that it is, without which, our students and residents just cannot thrive or compete in a global economy that's based on the internet. Recently we passed, the city council passed by resolution, a digital equity strategic plan, which is highly uncommon. I think we're one of 3 cities, large cities, that have done this. And the idea was to provide a framework not only for the mayor, but for the council, for our corporate citizens, for residents themselves, to understand what the digital divide is and how it impacts lives. And then to also lay out action items for what the city council can do. This strategic plan was the result of collaboration amongst the city and digital inclusion stakeholder coalition that was established back when Google Fiber came in town. So Google Fiber came, we realized that this was a big issue, and we had an entire community that rallied behind it. So the city of Kansas City is a founding member, as is the city of Kansas City, Kansas. The county is a member. Our 2 library systems are a member. We have 16 school districts. Many of the superintendents are members. ISPs are members. Literacy organizations are members. Our public housing authority executive director is a member. I mean, just every kind of organization that touches the lives of residents and has some role in digital inclusion has kind of rallied behind this. And so the city, as the convener, which is our primary role, brought all these minds together, broadcasted far and wide, hey, this is an effort that we're working on, but we want to engage the community to make sure we're legislating to actual needs. And so we had a series of community events, which was challenging in and of itself, because it's like we're so reliant on the internet and email and whatever to reach people. It's how do we reach those people that are disconnected? And so it's inserts in utility bills, or some blurb in the monthly newsletter that the community centers put out. So we had these community engagement meetings, and we're like, yeah, we've got, the city came up with a program where we donate our surplus of computer equipment to a surplus organization that triages them and wipes them and repurposes them and makes them available for low-cost purchase to residents. Or the library has all these programs, or the school has all these programs, or Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum have these low-cost service offerings. And residents were like, man, if we only knew. And hearing that over and over again, it's like, wow, we've got all these programs, but nobody knows about them. So one of the action items in our plan is to have, and this is going to sound really simple, like, duh, why didn't you think of this before? But to have an event where we've got a panel of a housing authority resident who participated in the Connect Home initiative and got connected and got some literacy skills training and got a low-cost computer through this program, talk about how the internet is relevant in their lives and has changed their lives. They got a job, or they're able to assist their kid with their homework or whatever. And then have, reps of ISPs, reps from the library, reps from some of the literacy organizations to talk about relevancy first, and then also to talk about some of the resources that are out there. And then for 2 hours after that, have table setups where the ISPs are there and signing folks up for these services. Or Connecting for Good, which is a literacy organization, is there signing people up for an hour slot to learn how to operate the mouse, how to access the internet, how to apply for a job, how to sign up for healthcare. So it's kind of trying to come up with basic ways to meet basic needs. But it's, I'm not going to steal this line from my counterpart on the city manager's side, but he says that digital inclusion is a team sport. Without, the partnership of people representative on this board or this panel, we couldn't do it alone.
So, I'm going to steal that team sport quote at some point in the future. One thing I think that has, and in many ways, this is a new ecosystem that's being created. And as part of any ecosystem, you got to learn to work together. And so, and this is something that's always challenging. The same way when you put a new team together in terms of sports, folks got to learn each other's plays. So one question that I have for everyone, and we can start with McLean and maybe go down the lot. If we think about the ecosystem and all the different players, think about what is one thing that you would need from another part of the ecosystem that you don't necessarily get right now that would make your life a lot easier, that would allow you to better accomplish your mission in closing the digital divide and whatever your particular vantage point is. So whether that be a policy change, a protocol change, whether it's finance, whether so on and so forth, what are those things? Because I think the way we get closer to that day when this is no longer an issue is we become better at being a better ecosystem, become better at being a better team. So kind of hearing what some of those things might be, I think would be really great. So starting with McLean and kind of going down the lot, what is something that you need from someone as part of this ecosystem? Or let me say it another way, who is someone who should be part of this ecosystem who is not right now?
So I guess from the city standpoint, we would benefit for more current data on, the kids in the schools or the kids in the libraries or the seniors in libraries or whomever, and, where they're starting from, and through our efforts, how we've moved the needle and impacted their lives, and, who's gained employment or who's signed up for healthcare or what have you. To kind of substantiate the mayor's claims when he's out here saying, corporate citizens, you need to step up to the plate and donate your surplus equipment just as the city is, or use your power for innovation or your ability to raise capital to do a startup around, digital inclusion or some kind of literacy app or, something to meet these needs. Right now, we're kind of working with dated data in the city, and so that would be extremely helpful to us just to have local data. One player that I would like to engage more is our workforce development organization. They are pretty involved, but I think that there are opportunity areas that we haven't yet explored, specifically around like small cell densification efforts and 5G technologies. I think that there's a way to really marry the need for folks, low-income, underemployed people to be trained up in these areas to learn how, not only the technologies, but how to deploy them and do the infrastructure, and just kind of have a holistic approach to benefiting these folks' lives. Our workforce development organization has been involved in Tech Hire, which is a White House initiative about providing accelerated training in specific areas of tech, so like financial services, healthcare, some areas of IT, and then I'm missing one other. But it's very narrow, and it requires partnership between like community colleges or other university systems, the workforce development arm, and then corporations who help devise a very specific curriculum that's just based off of what the actual job description entails, rather than requiring a 4-year degree for something that really doesn't require a 4-year degree. So looking for areas outside of just the discrete tech hire areas to collaborate, I think would be helpful.
Lara.
I guess the thing that strikes me, I've been working with libraries for about 16 years, both in Washington, D.C., doing policy, and now back in our headquarters. And the thing that strikes me is that people always underestimate what a library is capable of doing in this space. And in workforce, when the economy kind of fell out, we saw an opportunity to work with workforce development. And one of the things we had there was a note that went out to all the workforce agencies about collaborating with libraries because we're open later than workforce agencies are. We're multi-generational, so for people that have small children, they can come and they can get training and access and as well as have a place for their children to go. And this is the work that we do. So I find that people sometimes overlook libraries in part because of these old ideas of their own childhood in libraries. Our users tell us 91% approval rating. So I feel like it's rare that I hear from people that they have had a bad experience working with their library. But I find often that there's a big announcement where like, we're gonna save the world. And we're going to do all this, we're going to build this great thing when half of what they're building is already available through the library. And then we've got to make that up. So I think don't underestimate what libraries can do in this space. And then, when we're open, we can do more. So funding is always an issue for public libraries, but I would say that we're holding our own and our usage is strong. Our library card holders, more than half of Americans are library card holders. So the engagement is there in our community. So it's more our partners that somehow we are sometimes invisible, which is why I try to go to as many of these things as possible, is to say that I think there's a lot we can do together.
Karima.
I would say I think we need more attention for the private sector and the nonprofit sector to come together in interesting and innovative ways that we haven't really discovered yet, and I will be specific about it. So we provide a lot of financial and in-kind support to nonprofits for training, which is fantastic. We'll continue to do that. It's a necessary part of the equation. But what happens after that, and this is related to something both McLean and Lara said around workforce development. Are there different ways we can conceptualize partnering with nonprofits who provide training or other employers who provide training to build curricula that actually leads to employment? So we're trying to figure out right now, for example, can we build some kind of a hybrid model with some nonprofits where you have people who go into classes on the ground. I mean, you can never eliminate that. They need that, so they need to get their basic digital literacy training. And then can we build a connection to online training so that it's meaningful and that nonprofit is connected to a particular organization? It could be the private sector, it could be other nonprofit organizations, where you are having a person go through a series of trainings that leads to something around middle skills jobs, which is a theme that I've heard a lot at this conference. Not everybody needs a 4-year degree, so how can we build that connection so that you can build that pipeline and it's meaningful, and someone who doesn't know anything about a computer can walk into an organization on the ground, get the training they need, and then realize, oh, I see a pathway here into this job or whatever it is. And here's a pathway that I can start here and finish here, but actually I'm finishing online. So I think this is a place where some of those interesting ideas can come to fruition, and that's something we're trying to explore too. We want to add value to the lives of all of our customers, and we want the internet to lead to something more than just, okay, you're connected, that's fantastic, what's next?
Daryl.
Well, I've thought a lot about this. One of the reasons I retired was because knowing that a community like Coachella Valley Unified School District could eliminate that digital divide, I wondered what was happening in the rest of the country. And as I go around and speak to different state associations or technology organizations, I'm surprised by how many school districts aren't making that digital conversion. It's kind of scary in a way, because we're supposed to be the most prosperous nation in the world, but we have so many of our students who are not connected. So I truly believe that every student in America should have a device and the connectivity that goes along with it. Now, as a K-12 leader, servant leader, my philosophy is like, let's work together and do this, or sort of lead, follow, or get out the way, because we're going to do it. And I had a problem with our cable company, and not Comcast, with some of our local cable companies, because they didn't want to go to the tribal lands to provide students access, because they couldn't work out a deal where it was profitable for them. And this is not about profit. This is about people. And so I went to the FCC 3 or 4 years ago and said, can we become our own internet service provider? Can we become our own Comcast, or Time Warner, whatever, and provide our students with access for educational purposes? And I truly believe that if we change our mindset, every student in America should have a device and have connectivity for educational purposes. I'm not taking the profit motive out of you having them as consumers for that device necessarily, but there's a way to filter the device where it's used for educational purposes. And if we don't do that, I think what happens is we fall further and further behind. And you see some of the other countries, like Chile, like 10 years ago, I think, or 5 years ago, provided every child with an iPad. So if there's countries like Chile can do it, I know we can do it. We have to stop thinking profit and start thinking people. And every student should have the opportunity to learn in the 21st century to be prepared to be successful in the 21st century. I even told my staff one time, I would put a router on a pigeon if I have to and fly them around the neighborhood so kids could be connected. We need to do whatever it takes. So now that the FCC says you can become your own internet service provider, no threat to Comcast, because it takes a lot of money to lay fiber. But you innovators out there, you entrepreneurs out there, there's a way to do this, but we can provide that to every student in America. We need to change our mindset and think differently, because if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to keep getting the same result. And we are better than that as a country. So I'm excited about the opportunity to be here at ASU GSV, because you see these startups and you see these investors and you see these people that are pushing the envelope. And I think in education, especially K-12, we got to have more of this to be successful.
Sure, and to answer my own question a little bit, I think one group, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to give it a broad name, kind of the unlikely suspects, which is, in many ways, when I go to conferences like this, these are the parties that I see. And in some ways, when you go to conferences like this, you do a lot of talking to, singing to preaching to the choir. I'm interested in getting particularly parts of the private sector who depend on internet access for their business model to be part of, frankly, seeding this access on the front end. So for example, if you are a company that relies on online advertising, your bottom line is directly tied to the amount of eyeballs that are on the internet. You should be putting capital towards making that happen. Same way that in the old days, Intel used to advertise for the sale of PCs because their chips were in those PCs. And they knew they wanted to sell more chips, I need to sell more PCs. One example of this is actually not in the education space, but in the healthcare space, where basically particularly for people who have chronic illnesses, the University of Mississippi Medical Center basically took 100 diabetes patients, all of whom had gone to the ER at least once in the year before because they weren't managing their illness and they lived far away from a doctor. They gave them a home internet connection and a tablet and a blood glucometer you stick into your iPad so you can check your blood sugar. And if you didn't check your blood sugar, or if your level was too high, they gave you a phone call and they said, Bob, you didn't check your levels today. Please do that. Or Bob, your levels are high. Did you have a candy bar? We talked about this. And just to give you a sense, in the 6 months they first ran this study, hospitalizations for this population went to 0. And the hospital, just by missed ER visits, saved $339,184. When you annualize that, that is a 3-to-1 ROI from what they spent. That is, when I used to work in product development, that was the ROI I had to look for the lunch product. So how do we bring these people whose business model depends on access to the table so that they deploy their capital as part of their business model? Because one would say from a business perspective, it seems a little strange that you benefit on the back end from access when you haven't invested on the front end. So I would like to see those folks who are in this space, whether it be in social media, e-commerce, healthcare, education, to be part of this conversation because the business model depends on it. And a lot of these police people are frankly here in this, at this conference. Last question before we kind of have a wrap up. We have a lot of amazing innovators and amazing capital at this conference. And so folks who are here, or folks who are going to watch this later, for all these great technologists, for all these great investors, what would you tell them to do to help conquer this problem?
They need to call me.
Number one.
I have lots of ideas.
Number one.
Lots of ideas. And I think it really starts with making sure that kids, our youngest are our future. If they are not well prepared to be successful in the 21st century, who are you going to sell whatever you sell into? And so I just say, think about the K-12 space as crucial to the prosperity of the nation. And the way to do that is to provide equality and opportunity for students to truly learn those skills and to find that passion that they want to have. I used to tell my parents, I'm not educating kids to have them work in a factory. I'm educating them to have a purposeful life. And of course, there's no more factories anyway. But I want to make sure that we give them attention to K-12. And I know that I understand the profit motive. I get it. But if you don't have well-educated citizens, you're going to have a difficulty being successful. And so I say work with us in education to start using some of that innovation and that money to make a difference. Don't wait on the federal government or the state government to do it. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do it. and to work together to do it. Whether you're working in a small community or a large urban area, you innovators and venture capitalists out there, work with those communities. I know you do your nonprofit stuff, but you can do more, and I can give you some ideas.
Karima.
So after they call Daryl, then I would say to all the technologists out there that whatever you are developing or thinking of developing, whatever product that you would like to test in schools or just in any population, that you include the low-income population in that thinking. So in the actual development of the product. Because if you're not thinking, okay, can this, which could be some kind of transformative technology around education, can this apply to every single person, not just the middle-income kids or upper class kids, then you're not being socially inclusive in your development of your product. So you can do both. You can do well by doing good. So that's really the main message in this space, is that there's a huge segment of the population that is poor, and they need the tools, they need the great minds of the people at this conference to be thinking of them in the development of these products. So please don't forget.
And just to add maybe even a finer point to what Karima said, as you are developing products, particularly technology-based products, cloud-based products, factoring in, particularly for low-income students, how does this work if half the population doesn't have access to the internet at home? Does it work offline? Am I working with a provider to make sure that I'm coupling connectivity with the distribution of my product? But so even to put a finer point on it, to live the life of the student that you're trying to help, ask that question to the schools you're trying to work with. How many of your students actually have internet access, and how would this work with them if they don't have it? Or how can we help them get it? So just to put a really that finer point there. And I'll say, and you know, I've been involved in the development of a number of products, that question gets asked too little. So anyway, Lara.
I think there's a couple of things, right? Access is a precondition. We need to have broadband access everywhere. There's a lot of talk about broadband. We're talking about infrastructure bill in this country. Broadband should be part of that. People should be paying attention, and they should be advocating for broadband. But that's not enough. We need to be thinking about digital readiness and lifelong learning. We've been hearing about upskilling and reskilling. This is not a one and done, so we need to be thinking about what's next, right? Like we're not going to be done with this. And I think the last thing, just because when I talked to librarians to say I was going to be here, one of the things that they talked about is around beta testing and the opportunity, and talking to the ed tech community. Lots of libraries have co-working spaces where we do some support for startups, particularly those that are really just getting started, really little. Before they're ready for an incubator, they may start in their library. And some of them are doing alpha beta testing in libraries. That's part of their give back. They have a free co-work space through the library, but then they're able to also engage in trying out their product. How does it work? Does it work with the people that are in the library, many of whom don't have other access? So I get in trouble sometimes because I see what libraries could be doing and what they should be doing, in my opinion. But this is something that came to me from a librarian to say, please invite people to include us in thinking about how can they try things out and to reach a diverse audience.
McLean.
I'll just piggyback a bit on what Lara said. At the City of Kansas City, we've got an innovation partnership program where we bring in social entrepreneurs and other startups to basically use the city as a guinea pig for its product. So they identify a need or some way the city operations could be more efficient. They develop an app, and then they, for a 6-month period of time, test it on the city. We're then the test case for them, saying, hey, this is a great product. They can then market to other municipalities or to other customers. I think that cities are ready and willing participants to partner in that way. One thing that our mayor has done is to really hold our corporate citizens to task. And so we were kind of on Sprint and some other ISPs like, hey, what are you going to do? You come to us asking us for all kind of stuff all the time. What are you going to do for us? And so Sprint recently unveiled a pilot program for its 1 million project where they're going to provide free smartphones that can be used to get on the internet, free MiFi, Wi-Fi's, and then also free at-home connectivity for low-income students in our primary school district for a period of 4 years, so during the entirety of their high school career. But in exchange, Sprint is developing a loyal customer base and hoping that once these folks graduate from high school and they enter the workforce and better their lives because they had this access early on, that those folks will then turn into paying Sprint customers. So, I mean, it's not all, just doing social good, which you should, but there's also something to be gained out of it as well.
Great. So I'm looking to see how we want to use the last minutes that we have. Let me again answer my own question, and then also tell a quick story that I think shows the stakes of the work that we're talking about. So the one thing that I would say, particularly for the technologists and for the investors who are here, is that policy does matter. So again, whether you're an innovator or you're an investor, you're working in a policy context. And so if you didn't notice, a few months ago, we had this election thing. And so things are changing, not just in DC, but in many state capitals. So, and there are things that make it harder or easier for folks to get access to the internet. So for those of you who have heard about the Lifeline program, that basically used to be called the Obama phone, but basically now it's a subsidy program to potentially allow low-income families to pay for internet service. That's a program that is in danger of being curtailed right now. And again, there are 43 million people in this country who are eligible for that. Who in many ways, what that subsidy could actually pay for internet essentials.
And to be clear, it was started under President Reagan.
Reagan.
Just in case there's any confusion. I mean, the program started in the 80s.
Right, that woolly-eyed liberal Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, right.
So that's one. And there are a number of other policies that at times don't get a lot of attention, but that again make it harder or easier for folks to get online. So be as engaged, and I think particularly this is the voice of the people who are here, of course, that really do matter to people who are in policy, because they don't hear from you all that often.
Yeah.
So I think so that's number one, and then the story, and I'm going to start the story at the end. At everyone on one of our partners is the company called GitHub. GitHub is the largest open source web development platform in the world, and and their social impact technologist is a guy named Danilo Campos, who one of the frankly few Latinos in Silicon Valley who has made a career as a technologist, as an engineer, as a programmer, places like Apple and places like Google. That's the end of his story. And right now he works with GitHub with folks like us and with folks like who are on the stage to get more people online so that GitHub can reap the benefits down the road of a workforce that looks more like America. That's what he does today. His story starts when his mom immigrated from Puerto Rico when he was 2, single mom, and he grew up in public housing in Manhattan. And what the day that changed his life, as he told me when I first met him, is when I was 8, his mom got a home internet connection and got him a computer. And he began that day to teach himself how to program. And that's what got him to where he is today. And my belief, and I think the belief of most people on this stage, is that there are kids like that across the country, who the only thing that stands between them and that future is the opportunity that comes with an internet connection. And in many ways, shame on us if we let a lack of a $10 internet connection that Comcast or anyone else could provide, if we let that stand in the way of that. So those are the stakes of this. And again, the people who are in this room and who are at this conference and who might watch this panel further can help make that happen. So first of all, can we give a round of applause to our amazing panel? And to the extent you all are available, I think they'll love to have a chat with any of you all who are in the room. So thank you all so much.
Thanks. Thank you.